Okay, hello. I thought it would be fun to do a top 20 directors right now list, just talking about people that I think are doing really great things for film, and people that I'm particularly excited about whenever a new movie is released or announced from them. Before I get into it, I'll do some honorable mentions and also want to mention the criteria. This is a lot about like what they are doing currently as well as what they are going to do later on, like upcoming releases and how excited I am for those. It's a lot of emphasis on right now. So like for instance, spoiler alert, people like Tarantino and Nolan and Scorsese will be somewhere on this list, but I am putting more of an emphasis on like their most recent releases. Obviously Scorsese is probably like the best filmmaker here because he's just been working for like 5 decades now, but here I'm more focused on right now, who is a great filmmaker right now and who is going to continue to be a great filmmaker in the future. But I'm also wanting to have some like established names here. So just a general rule, I wanted to have filmmakers who I've seen more than 2 movies from, or 2 or more movies from. So anyone who's only had one film come out, or anyone who's had just one film that I've seen personally come out, are not going to be included on this list, but I will name them in the honorable mentions here. Shane Shoburn, love Saw the TV Glow. Still haven't seen We're All Going to the World's Fair, but think that she's going to be a very significant director and like surreal horror going forwards. Celine Song, thought Past Lives was really great. Justine Triet, love Anatomy of a Fall. Do not know what she's doing next yet. Christopher Borgli, love Dream Scenario, and very excited for the drama, his next movie with Zendaya and Robert Pattinson. Greg Fedor, who was one of the directors on Sing Sing. Brady Corbet for The Brutalist. Corley Fargo, who I thought did really great work on The Substance. Chloe Zhao, The Daniels, Sean Durkin, Charlotte Wells, Zach Kreger, Michael and Danny Filippo, and Kyle Edward Ball are all filmmakers that would probably make this list if they had just a couple more movies out, so that I could like trust that they are going to be great going forward and that they weren't like one-hit wonders, although the talent is kind of unmistakable here for the majority of them. Other honorable mentions, these are just like random anomalies, people that I think are great but either might not direct a movie ever again, or if they do, it will be in a very long time. First up, we have Bo Burnham, who has only directed 8th Grade. I guess you could count Inside as a movie, sort of, but like not really. I do like Inside quite a bit, but I love 8th Grade. I think it's absolutely fantastic and one of the best coming of age movies. But he is a comedian, and he hasn't even been doing much of that either, so I don't know if he's ever gonna do a feature-length film just directing again. The second one is Nathan Fielder, who I think is like one of the most genius visionary dudes out there. Really, really funny, but also like has a lot of psychological intrigue to what he's doing. The Rehearsal is going around right now, and it's the 2nd season, and it is just like some really, really strange stuff. He is going to make a film, I believe, called Checkmate with A24. That is his first feature film, and I'm excited about that. But again, because he's only been doing TV, I want to keep it to just like film directors here. Another mention would be Mark Mylod, who I really love and has done a lot of great television in the past. Only has directed The Menu and has not had any like new feature films being set up, but I think is one of the most talented directors, but again, really only in TV, so he's not going to be included on this list. Hayao Miyazaki, one of the best directors really ever, specifically in the world of animation, but I think he might be retired, so I didn't want to put him on this list. Kenneth Lonergan, who Manchester by the Sea is great. I think one of the best movies of that year. Really incredible drama, very emotionally affecting, but like he hasn't made a movie since then, and I think that's almost like a decade ago. That was 8 years ago now. So I don't know if he's gonna make another movie, so I didn't want to include him. And then we have people that just didn't make the cut, unfortunately. These are people who did meet the criteria and were in consideration, but I only have 20 spots here, so I did not include them. Filmmakers who just missed the cut, I will go over briefly here. We have Spike Lee, Alexander Payne, David Fincher, who obviously is one of the greatest directors really ever, but I haven't loved what he's been coming out with lately. Mank is kind of bland to me, and The Killer is good but not great. So just based on like recent input, I didn't put him on this list. Steve McQueen, George Miller, Park Chan-wook, Barry Jenkins, Jim Jarmusch, Hirokazu Koreda, who has been making great stuff lately. I love Broker, and I thought Monster was very, very interesting, even if it wasn't entirely my thing. But only 20 spots, so couldn't put him on here. Alejandro Inarritu, Alfonso Cuarón, who would definitely be on this list if he just made more movies, because he hasn't made a movie since Roma, which was 7 years ago. Steven Soderbergh, Jesse Eisenberg, Ryan Johnson, who I think is probably the one, him or Fincher or Spike Lee would be like, if I had another spot on this list, I would probably give it to one of them. Spike Lee is close, but I haven't seen all of his movies. I've probably only seen like 7 or 8, and I honestly really like all of them, but I have really only been going through the classics. Spike Lee's great, obviously just a legendary filmmaker, but again, hasn't made a movie since The Five Bloods. He has Highest to Lowest coming out, but I don't want to base it on like if that movie is good, because what if that movie is not good? So anyway, I'm kind of rambling. He's not on this list. Let's get into the actual list. I think I'll go through the 11 through 20 kind of briefly, and then once we get to the top 10, I will slowly start talking about them in more detail. I also will be talking about their latest movie and what I thought of that, as well as if they have any upcoming releases that I'm specifically excited for. Number 20, we have Jonathan Glazer, whose most recent film was Zone of Interest in 2023. Upcoming, there was an interview where he talked about he was making a film about tenderness, which is very vague, and I don't know what that means. Jonathan Glazer is someone who is not very prolific. It takes him quite a while to make a film, since 1999. With his debut, Sexy Beast, which is an incredible crime thriller thing. But again, that was in 1999, and he's only made 4 films in the past 27 years, which is crazy. I haven't seen Birth. I've seen the other 3. All of them are really, really great. I just think he's absolutely brilliant. Zone of Interest in particular is just so captivating and simultaneously somewhat experimental in what it's doing, but is also like very accessible and very easy to connect to like the emotions he's trying to translate to the viewer. It's definitely a hard watch, but it's also a really fascinating watch. And yeah, I just think he knows what he's doing with film, and each release has been like something very, very different, incredibly dynamic and versatile filmmaker, who in some ways is like the closest thing we have to Kubrick at this point, and the fact that he kind of hops genres a lot, but also has like this very clinical and cerebral approach to filmmaking. Because he's only come out with 4 films, I don't think he's like on that level of filmography as Kubrick, but I do see a lot of similarities in their filmmaking style. Next up, at number 19, we have the person who's probably the furthest from Stanley Kubrick on this list, which is Emma Seligman. This is probably the pick that a lot of people will be a little bit frustrated about being on here, because I could see wanting like Spike Lee or Ryan Johnson in this spot over her, but I really like her. Her most recent film was Bottoms, also directed Shiva Baby. I believe those are her only 2 feature films to date. And upcoming, I don't know what she's doing next. She is doing great things in like the comedy sphere, which is dying a lot in Hollywood. Has not been a lot of really great, successful comedies lately, but Shiva Baby and Bottoms are really great examples of that, and are also 2 very different like styles of humor that work really well. So yeah, I don't think a lot of people would put her in this conversation, but because she is operating in a genre and in a style of filmmaking that I think is very important to Hollywood right now, but is also not really getting done at the quality that it should be getting done at, I think she deserves a spot on this list, and I hope that she continues to just make really funny movies. Number 18, we have Jordan Peele, whose most recent film was Nope, which came out in, I believe, 2022. And upcoming, he has an untitled movie coming out around October, I believe, in 2026. He's also producing a movie called Him that is coming out this year, which looks like this really great horror psychological thriller thing about a football player. That's another thing I was wondering, is like, should I factor in producing? Because a lot of these filmmakers also produce stuff. Like Barry Jenkins has produced a lot of great stuff, but I haven't really taken that much into account. But I do think Jordan Peele is, as a producer, is very important to Hollywood right now. I don't think I have to talk much about Jordan Peele. He's just great. I'm going to talk about like the big three of horror right now, and he is the lowest of the three on this list, but they all appear on this list, and I'll bring them up as I get to them. But yeah, just someone who is really pushing the boundaries of horror and doing really great thought-provoking stuff that has a lot of social commentary to it, but is also just like genuinely really, really entertaining, really scary, really thrilling, really funny. He has a great sense of humor to his films, which makes sense because he obviously comes from a background of comedy. But one thing I was thinking about with like this big three of horror, that I will get to the other two later, is that they are slowly like branching away from horror, and I'm curious to see with Jordan Peele what he does. I could see him like going into just pure blockbuster filmmaking. Like Nope has some horror elements, but is also like pretty much just Jaws, but it's an alien instead of a shark, and because of the alien thing, has a lot of sci-fi elements. So yeah, someone who I think could really do anything with his next film, and that unpredictability, but also like that confidence in what he's able to do as a filmmaker gets me really excited for what he's going to do next. Number 17, we have Martin McDonagh, whose most recent film is Banshees of Inisherin. Upcoming, he has a movie called Wild Horse 9, which stars Sam Rockwell and Mark Ruffalo and someone else. I think maybe Christopher Walken, but I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, Martin McDonagh kind of is here from his strength as a screenwriter in particular. I think he's a solid enough director as well, and specifically knows how to like nail the tone of his own writing. But I think his talents lie more so in his writing. Really, really great dialogue, really interesting characters, knows how to like stay on theme, and has this really great cynical but also like very emotionally riveting sense of humor to his films. I thought that Banshees of Inisherin was really, really great. Hasn't made a movie that I've been like completely in love with yet, but every single movie that he's made has been really solid and one of the best of the year that it's come out in. Number 16, we have someone that I actually wasn't gonna put on this list until he came out with a movie just this year. That is Ryan Coogler, who I think would have missed the cut last year. But because Sinners, his most recent movie, was so great, I thought I should probably include him. And upcoming, I don't know what he's doing. I know that Black Panther 3 is in development. I don't know if he's directing that. And Marvel is obviously kind of spotty with what they're doing right now, so that could like just fall through. But I don't know, whatever he's doing, I'm sure it's going to be great. Sinners is a great spectacle and a great blockbuster, but is most importantly very original. Completely original script, obviously taking some influences from stuff like From Dusk Till Dawn, but is like very uniquely its own thing. And I think that's very important for filmmakers that are doing things that are super unique in Hollywood right now. And he kind of got started doing this blockbuster stuff, doing like existing IP stuff like Creed and Black Panther, which I think those movies are pretty good. Actually, Creed is maybe my favorite Rocky movie, and Black Panther is one of the best Marvel movies ever, obviously. But I am more excited to see what he's gonna do as a, original filmmaker going forwards. Number 15, we have Paul Thomas Anderson, whose most recent is Licorice Pizza, a movie that I think is a lot of fun, but is also like definitely not one of the best things he's ever done. And upcoming, he has One Battle After Another, probably my most anticipated movie of the rest of 2025, starring DiCaprio, based on some Thomas Pynchon book that I might check out, but also Thomas Pynchon is really hard to read, so I don't know if I'll get to it. The trailer looks just absolutely incredible. I don't think PTA needs much introduction, just been making great films since the 90s. One thing I love about him is just how energetic all of his movies are. I don't want to get into like his filmography because I think when One Battle After Another comes out, I'll do a ranking, but I love the more like mature, contemplative, as well as like ambiguous elements of PTA's filmmaking that he started to explore later on in his career. I hope that as his career progresses, he will start to lean on that a little bit more as well. At number 14, we have Richard Linklater, whose most recent was Hitman. Upcoming, he has actually two movies coming out this year, one being Blue Moon, some movie about, I think, a Broadway production of Oklahoma starring Margaret Qualley and Ethan Hawke. And the other one being Nouvelle Vague, which is premiering at Cannes this year and is about the French New Wave. I'm from Austin, so Richard Linklater is kind of like mandatory viewing for me as a film lover from Austin. But also, Richard Linklater is genuinely one of my favorite filmmakers ever. He's a little low on this list because I think his best work is around like the 2000s, maybe like late 90s stuff that he did, like the Before trilogy. I think Boyhood's great as well. But yeah, just so great at this natural sounding dialogue that is really psychologically riveting, as well as being great at making like these very fun genre films. I think Hitman is just an absolute blast and isn't very Linklaterian in that it's not like as meandering and plotless, but is still really nailing that dialogue. The through line of his films is just being very interested in the philosophy of people and in the identity of people and why they behave the way they behave, which is somewhat vague, and I think that's good for a filmmaker to explore something that is like very overarching and very like relatable to a lot of people, because he can explore it in a bunch of different genres and a bunch of different tones and a bunch of different ways, and he's been doing that throughout his career. I forgot to mention he also one thing he does a lot is like messing with time through his films, not like in a Christopher Nolan way, but in like a filming way where he'll have the Before trilogy, which is like every 9 years we're reevaluating the same relationship, and then Boyhood, which he filmed over 15 years, and the other movie that he's coming out with that I didn't put on here because it's not coming out for a very long time is Merrily We Roll Along, an adaptation of the Broadway musical that stars Paul Mescal, but isn't going to come out for like another probably 12 years, because I think it's filming like for 15 years and it's been filming for about 3 years so far. So like, when is that? 38. So it's going to be a while, but it will be great to see if like he's going to keep making movies until then, because he's very prolific and some of his movies aren't the best, but I think I always appreciate what he is doing with his films. And it's just a really great voice and one of my favorite filmmakers ever. Number 13, we have Ari Aster. Most recent is Beau is Afraid. Upcoming is Eddington, one of the other big three of horror that I was talking about recently. And the person who I think has most clearly deviated from the genre that he started in. Hereditary and Midsummer are the only two films that I would consider to be like straightforward horror movies, and even Midsummer is not that straightforward, really. Then Beau is Afraid is like has horror elements, but is mainly a weird, absurd comedy. And Eddington doesn't look like it has many horror elements at all, so he could be completely leaving that genre. I think whatever happens, Aster is just so talented as a filmmaker and is sometimes like doing stuff for shock value that I find a little bit frustrating, but for the most part is making some of the most interesting films right now. Number 12, we have Greta Gerwig, who I think a lot of people would consider to be pretty low. Probably some people want her in the top 10. I think that her films have gotten a little worse every single movie. I think Lady Bird is a masterpiece, absolutely incredible. Little Women is really, really great. And then Barbie is just good, in my opinion. Upcoming, she's doing Narnia, which is exciting because she's getting to do something with a big budget again, but is also like, I don't know what she's gonna do with this, and I don't really see like the direct connection between the Narnia source material and Gerwig as a filmmaker, but I'm sure she'll do a great job. Another person who doesn't really need much introduction, just a really great filmmaker who's making very, very like specific films that I think are wildly entertaining, but are also like really, I don't know, prestigious or classy in some sense. Even Barbie is imbued with like this sense of psychological intrigue and like this really great sense of humor, but also like a very deeply emotional film, as well as a film that is about something. It's very rare in Hollywood right now for a filmmaker to be given a ton of creative freedom to really do whatever they want. And she is one of those people. Her and Nolan and I think Coogler, as well as Peele, are people that are really allowed to do whatever they want because their name alone kind of garners some amount of like people want to go see their movies. And Gerwig, I'm very interested to see what she is going to do with that name recognition, because again, she could really make anything she wants at this point, and I'm curious to see like what she is specifically passionate about as a filmmaker. Number 11, we have Quentin Tarantino, whose most recent is Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and upcoming, not entirely sure, he is writing the script for, or he's written the script already for the new David Fincher movie, which is a sequel to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I was hesitant to put him on this list because he is only making one more movie, presumably. But I think it's pretty unmistakable. He's just one of the best to do it out there. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is also one of my favorite Tarantino movies. Really, really great. I think he is one of those rare legendary filmmakers who hasn't really missed a beat. He has been very choosy with his films. You know, someone like Steven Soderbergh has made probably like, 40 movies at this point, and Tarantino's only made 9/10, whether you want to count Kill Bill as 1 or 2. I don't know. I don't care. The point is, like, he's been very choosy, but that has led to him having a really, like, tight and very great filmography, and it's helped to maintain, like, the rarity of his releases, which I think makes his name like so much more exciting when it pops up and is attached to a new project. Just again, don't really have to talk too much about Tarantino. He's Tarantino. He's awesome. Number 10, we have Sean Baker, whose most recent was obviously Nora, where he won like 4 Oscars just by himself. The film itself, I believe, won 5 or 6. And upcoming, I don't know. Seems like he's very much basking in the glory of Anora right now. Great filmmaker. Really good at talking about class in his films. Has been making stuff that has been dubbed as American neorealism, and that it is very naturalistic, incorporates a lot of non-professional actors or unproven talents, and just has like an authenticity to it that is rare in films right now, and can really only be accomplished through independent filmmaking, which is why I think his next film will probably be in that same vein as well. Once you get like a night like that, an Oscar night like that, where you win just everything, typically a filmmaker will get like a blank check movie. They'll be able to make whatever movie they want, and the studio will just give them the money because their name is really hot right now. Bong Joon-ho did this recently, obviously, and then the Daniels are going to be doing it soon. But I don't think Sean Baker is going to do that, because Sean Baker's whole brand and whole MO is independent filmmaking. And I hope he continues in that, because I don't know what a big budget Sean Baker movie would look like. But yeah, that's kind of beside the point. The point is that Sean Baker, great filmmaker, movies that are simultaneously like really entertaining and really fun to watch as stories, but are also saying something very significant about like the state of America right now. And I just think he's really talented, really great. At number 9, I have Christopher Nolan. Most recent is Oppenheimer, obviously, and upcoming is Odyssey, which coming out next year, and already feels like it's going to be one of the biggest movies of that year, if not like of the entire decade so far. Someone else who I don't really need to talk about too much, just really great filmmaker, who is continually like pushing himself as a filmmaker. Obviously has like a very distinct style. Like you can tell when you're watching a Nolan movie, whether it's a superhero movie or a sci-fi movie or a crime movie or a historical epic movie. You can tell when you're watching a Nolan movie, and like it's not just because Cillian Murphy's in it, it's because like the style looks the same, and like the structure of the film is always like very time bendy. But like generally you can feel when you're watching a Nolan movie, but he's also like always doing new things with his films. In particular, I think The Odyssey is like a strange deviation from what he usually does. A fantasy film from Nolan, I don't even know what that would look like, which is what gets me so excited about that movie. But yeah, I don't have anything else to say about Nolan. He's great. Not as hot on him as I think some other people are. Some people think he is like the greatest filmmaker to ever live. I think he's just pretty good. Pretty great. But yeah, and I think he's doing some of his best work recently. I know a lot of people didn't like Tenet, but to me, like that's just great blockbuster filmmaking. Just like an absolute blast, ridiculously great score, just great vibes, great vibe movie. Yeah, I love Christopher Nolan. Number 8, we have Wes Anderson, whose most recents have been both Asteroid City as well as the short films he did for Netflix that were Roald Dahl adaptations. I don't want to spoil stuff about my Wes Anderson ranking, but a lot of people have been critical of what he's been doing recently as being like too Wes Anderson-y. I think he has just only gotten better as a filmmaker. Maybe not necessarily like as a storyteller. I think some of his best stories are earlier on in his career, but like he is polishing and perfecting a very, very singular directorial style that is just really impressive to behold. The ridiculously large casts, the incredible production design, the gorgeous cinematography, the very like iconic and kind of quirky soundtracks. He's someone who can be labeled as like being too weird for the sake of being weird. But I think he's really, really great and is just continually leaning more and more into his sensibilities and into a similar style. And as a result has kind of created this niche for himself that on the negative side, I don't think he can ever really escape. Like he's always going to be Wes Anderson, and there's going to be people that like Wes Anderson, and there's going to be people that don't like Wes Anderson. Because he's on this list at number 8, obviously I'm one of those people that like Wes Anderson. But there is a divisiveness to his filmmaking that might mean some people don't like this placement, but I think he's great. At number 7, we have Kelly Reichardt, whose most recent is showing up, and upcoming is The Mastermind, which is premiering at Cannes, stars Josh O'Connor, and I believe Alana Haim as well. The master of slow cinema, all her films are very atmospherically riveting, as well as like very simplistic. A lot of them are just like watching people do things. In particular, Showing Up, her most recent, is just like Michelle Williams doing pottery and living life. And I just think it's so riveting what she does, and has like a density to it that I don't think can come out of anything that is like this slow unless you are very meticulously planning what you're doing. I think people could see her movies as like boring or as just like people watching in a sense, and they are kind of that, but there's a lot more beneath the surface of her films, and I just think they're very, very poetic and very like thematically intriguing to me. And I just love what she does. Definitely my favorite female filmmaker right now. At number 6, I have the Safdie brothers. Kind of a weird one because this is 2 filmmakers, obviously, that are actually right now in the process of branching out into their own solo work. Both of them have solo films coming out this year. Benny Safdie is coming out with Smashing Machine with The Rock and Emily Blunt. It's like a wrestling biopic. The trailer came out a week ago and it looks really, really good. And then Josh is coming out with Marty Supreme, which is some ping pong movie with Timothée Chalamet that looks like it's gonna be incredible. But yeah, they're separate right now, obviously, but their most recent thing they did was together with Uncut Gems. There is a sense of like maybe they're too Scorsesean because obviously like they're making crime films in New York, and then Benny Safdie is making a boxing biopic, which is like very much in the vein of Raging Bull, it looks like. But they are doing a very different type of filmmaking. Their movies don't feel like Scorsese. They just feel heavily influenced by Scorsese. But they have like that same kinetic, adrenaline-fueled energy to them that I think is very indicative of not only Scorsese, but New York cinema in general. Uncut Gems is maybe one of the best movies to come out in the past decade. It is just unbelievable, ridiculously good Adam Sandler performance, surprisingly incredible Kevin Garnett performance as well, and is just really hard to watch, just drenched in anxiety, and is still kind of fun to watch because it's just like on the edge of your seat cinema that like never ever lets up. And I just love that sort of filmmaking. I think that the Safdie brothers are really good at it. And yeah, the people that I think of the most when I think about like what the future of cinema is going to be. Getting to the top 5 now. Number 5, we have Martin Scorsese, who even at this age still doing incredible work. Most recent was Killers of the Flower Moon. He also is linked to a bunch of different movies that we may never see come out. He is attached to a Frank Sinatra biopic starring Leonardo DiCaprio, an adaptation of Home, a book by Marilyn Robinson. There's also this movie that's like a Hawaiian mob movie starring The Rock and DiCaprio and Emily Blunt that was talked about a few months ago, and might happen, might not. I don't really know. Devil in the White City, which I've heard is like something that he's been wanting to make for a while with DiCaprio, that might happen. Some movie about the life of Jesus, and then The Wager, which is a book that is written by the dude who wrote Killers of the Flower Moon, and yeah, he supposedly is going to adapt that. But that's like half a dozen movies that he is attached to, that have not really gone farther than pre-production, as far as I'm aware of. I don't want to think about like what happens when Scorsese inevitably passes, but I don't think he's going to be able to, with the amount of time he has left on Earth, make all of these movies. So I don't know which one he's going to make, but whichever one he does, I'm going to be there. Opening night. Scorsese's incredible. Another person I don't really have to talk about very much. I love what he's been doing lately, specifically. His movies are very long-winded, but are never self-indulgent, and are very like contemplative and meditative, about like evil and life and morality and death, and just like really, really captivating stuff. Both The Irishman and Flower Moon are like just works of art. Films that, like, if you would want just one of those movies, one of those like masterpiece kind of films in your filmography, and Scorsese happens to have like one in every decade that he's been making movies, it's just incredible. The filmography is crazy, and yeah, I cannot wait to see what he does next, because unlike a lot of older auteurs, he is still doing incredible work. I would argue some of his best work right now. At number 4, we have Denis Villeneuve, whose most recent was obviously Dune Part 2, and upcoming is Dune Messiah. I love Dune Part 2, favorite movie of last year. Just brilliant, brilliant filmmaking. I believe Messiah is coming out next year. I cannot wait for that. And then after that, I'm very curious to see what he goes on to do in his career, because after the success of this trilogy, I think he is going to be one of those filmmakers that will be given any amount of money by Hollywood. And he's just so talented as a director. Probably makes like the most cerebral films. He's been described as like kind of emotionless, but I do think there's a lot of emotion to his films. They're just like almost so clinical that you can't really tell. Also a filmmaker who has been doing a lot of different genres. Obviously recently has specifically gravitated towards the sci-fi genre, but has made like crime stuff, has made just like straightforward dramas, has made a lot of different sorts of films, has made action movies as well. And I think makes films that are like very intellectually stimulating, but are also like commercially viable in a sense. Obviously the Dune movies are, but also like Sicario. If a movie like Sicario came out right now that his name is attached to a franchise as big as Dune, I think that would be like a gargantuan movie and make a ton of money. So someone who like really well bridges together like that artistic talent and that commercial appeal that I think makes a filmmaker so intriguing. Next up at number 3, we have Robert Eggers, who is the last of the big 3 horror filmmakers I was talking about. Peele, Astor, and Eggers, I think, are the 3 people who really brought horror back to the forefront. Specifically, this idea of like elevated art house horror that primarily stems from A24 stuff. But obviously Peele is not attached to A24 at all, and is still doing like this art house horror where like everything is a metaphor, essentially. And Eggers, I think, is the one who has drifted away from horror the least of these 3 people. The Northman has horror elements, but is mainly like a revenge movie, but then he went right back to it with Nosferatu last year, which is really, really good. And then upcoming, he has a movie called Werewolf, which is probably going to be a horror movie, just guessing. Yeah, makes really great like period pieces that also just happen to be really terrifying movies, and is also clearly fascinated with like the idea of the occult and what that says about religion and good and evil, which he specifically dives into a lot in Nosferatu. He's someone who can simultaneously make like a huge epic like The Northman really work, but also feel character driven, and then make something as small scale as The Lighthouse feel like really significant and large scale. So able to operate within like both small scale and large scale stuff, both like low budget and high budget filmmaking. And that specific talent is something that I think will lend himself well to whatever he ends up doing in the future. Also a really great dialogue writer. There's so many great monologues in his films, specifically The Lighthouse, but also like there's a Nosferatu monologue that Willem Dafoe has that is just awesome. Obviously, Anya Taylor-Joy has a couple incredible moments in The Witch. Is really able to get great and very committed performances out of everyone in his cast, and is someone who I think a lot of people really want to work with in the filmmaking world right now. So yeah, I think he's great. I'm curious to see if he ever like branches out from like the period piece horror that he is known for at this point, but at the same time, like there's a lot of different periods that he can explore, so he doesn't really need to branch out. He's made films in a lot of different periods and has nailed the aesthetic and the atmosphere and the dialect of all of those periods. So it would be great if he just like kept going through a bunch of different periods in the world and found like elements of the occult and elements of horror within all of them. Just a fascinating filmmaker. And number 2, we have Yorgos Lanthimos, whose most recent is Kinds of Kindness, and his upcoming is Begonia, coming out this year in November, I think. Stars Emma Stone, Jesse Plemons, 2 people he worked with just recently on Kinds of Kindness. Yorgos Lanthimos, definitely an acquired taste, but I really love him. Has a great sense of humor in his films that is very, very specific, but is just so funny to me. I think his movies are absolutely hilarious. Has a dryness to his films that are great, but also has like a spectrum of dryness to him. Like Poor Things is very absurd and very out there and very like vibrant in its specific visual style, but still has like that dryness and that weird feel in the dialogue. And then Kinds of Kindness like leans way into the dryness, and like those are 2 films that are specifically and distinctly Yorgos Lanthimos movies, but are Yorgos Lanthimos movies in 2 very, very different ways. He's someone who I can understand not liking, and I can understand having genuine criticisms about his films, but me personally, I just think his movies, the way he writes stories is so entertaining. He's able to get really odd performances out of people, and he's just going to odd places in his movies that I find like really, really mesmerizing and very, very interesting. So yeah, he is at number 2. But at number 1, who I think is probably the best filmmaker working right now, we have Mr. Luca Guadagnino, whose most recent movie was Queer, also came out with Challengers last year. 2 movies in 1 year, and both of them I think are really, really great. And upcoming, he has After the Hunt coming out this year, as well as Separate Rooms, which is some movie starring Lea Seydoux and Josh O'Connor. Also, reportedly is doing an American Psycho remake. All 3 of these films sound very different from each other, and that's what I think is so fascinating about Luca Guadagnino. You can kind of tell when you're watching a Luca movie. It's very like atmospheric and like very based on vibe, and it's just a lot of like hanging out with characters, but also like there's always an emotion to it, and for the most part a plot to his films. But each of his films have seen him like experiment and try different things, but always be like very stylized with what he's doing. Challengers in Queer is a great example of this. 2 very, very different films. Queer is like very surreal and strange, and then Challengers is like a straightforward, really fun, romantic drama sports thing that has one of the best scores really of all time, honestly. And yeah, like that distinction between these 2 films is so like the gap is so wide. These are 2 very different movies, but they're also so quintessentially Guadagninoan, if that makes any sense. I think all of his films have been really fun, really entertaining, but also like deeply emotionally affecting and stick with you in very different ways. Also someone who, unlike some of these auteurs, doesn't write his own screenplays. He works with a different screenwriter almost every single movie. And I think that lends itself well to the fact that he doesn't want a specific style to his films. He doesn't want to be like Yorgos or Wes Anderson, where you can very much tell when you're watching a movie by those people, because while those filmmakers are great, they're in the top 10 of this list, they are also like kind of writing themselves into corners a little bit. And Guadagnino definitely feels like he wants to like break out and not like be put in a box as a filmmaker. And I think that means that every single time he comes out with a movie, it's gonna be a little risky. It could not work out potentially, but he has the talent to really do whatever he wants. So I'm really excited for After the Hunt. I think he's really, really talented as a filmmaker. But that's it. Yeah, I don't have anything else. This is my top 20 directors. Maybe I'll do this in a year again or in a couple of years, because I think these kind of shift, and it would be fun to kind of do a power ranking to see like who's on top at a specific period of time. But yeah, that's all I got. Next week I'll be doing a Wes Anderson review. I'm gonna do a ranked in about 3 weeks, but I want to get in depth on a couple of his older movies before the Phoenician Scheme. That's it for this video. So yeah, goodbye.